Welcome to the NHL Wraparound podcast featuring Neil Smith, President General Manager of the 1994 Stanley Cup champion New York Rangers, and longtime ESPN NHL veteran Vic Morren. Together, they share no-nonsense opinions on news and issues around the National Hockey League. Whether you're a casual or diehard fan, each episode of NHL Wraparound will leave you more informed. Now, here's your hosts, Neil and Vic.
What are we going to do for an encore? Welcome to NHL Wraparound on Cinco de Mayo, May 5th, 2025. Vic Morren, Neil Smith, and we will be joined once again to go over round two with TSN Analyst Craig Button in just a few moments. But just when you thought you couldn't top what happened on Saturday, you got Sunday.
Yeah, amazing games. Both of those games, if you miss them, find them, watch them, they're worth it. Both of those games were thrillers, and the way Game 7 should be.
Epical in nature, both of them, games for the ages, say whatever you want. It was the epitome of what Stanley Cup hockey is all about and why this is the best sporting event in the world, bar none. So with that, we get into three things you need to pay attention to, brought to you by UBS Financial Services, Inc. Number one, the Winnipeg Jets somehow move on to face the Dallas Stars in round number two with a thrilling 4-3 Game 7 victory over the St. Louis Blues. It was the 207th game in NHL history and the 50th of those to go to overtime. This was a 3-1 lead late for the Blues. And with Connor Hellebuyck pulled, Vlad Namestnikov, his shot goes in off Ryan Suter with $1:56 left. And then in the waning seconds, Cole Perfetti tips in his shot from Kyle Connor with 3 seconds to go. And then late in the second overtime, Captain Adam Lowry tips in a shot from Neil Pionk for the game-winning goal. Neil Pionk, 46 minutes and 15 seconds. Dylan Sandberg, 44 minutes. With Josh Morrissey leaving early in the first period due to an upper body injury suffered on a hit from Oscar Sundqvist.
Yeah, and it looked like he was really hurt when you saw him on the bench. He was grimacing, and that doesn't do well for the future for the Jets. But right now we're talking about what is the recent past. But with Scheifele and Morrissey out, if they're going to be out at the first game of the next round, it's going to be very difficult for the Jets. But the Jets won all 4 games in Winnipeg, the Blues all 3 games in St. Louis, and it was a fitting ending to a great series and a really well played by almost everybody except Connor Hellebuyck until the second and third period of Game 7 when he came up big. And then, of course, in the overtimes, he started to become and show who he is as a Vezina Trophy 2-time, will be 3-time winner in goal.
The ironic thing here is as much as he has struggled on the road in St. Louis in this opening round, as you said, he did manage to go 4-0.
Absolutely.
At home.
Yep.
Right?
And he got the whiteout happy, and it's been a while since they've won a round. And it would be great that the President's Trophy winners don't go out in the first round. That's really great. Now we'll see how far the Jets can fly.
Item number 2. Entering this weekend, there had been only 3 multi-goal comebacks in the third period of Game 7, and Colorado and Dallas on Saturday, and the Jets and Blues on Sunday became numbers 4 and 5. And in that Dallas-Colorado series, we talked about it on Sunday, that the performance by Mikko Rantanen, with 3 goals and an assist, perhaps the most epical playoff performance by an individual since 1994.
Oh, absolutely. It was fantastic. And the storylines behind Rantanen playing for the Stars, coming from the Avalanche, 10 great seasons or whatever in Colorado and becoming a star player there, being dealt in the middle of the season, not to the Stars, but to the Carolina Hurricanes, who he told he would not sign with. So therefore, they quickly dealt him to the Avalanche's nemesis, the Dallas Stars, and it's him that beats his old team to advance his new team, the Dallas Stars, in the playoffs. You can't write stories better than this.
And leading into point number 3, you can't tell it any better than what we heard from Sean McDonough on Saturday night for ABC, and then Kenny Albert and Harnarian Singh for Sportsnet. The way these games were called and the way the drama was captured, they call it, they add the quick perspective, they lay out, and then they let the pictures speak for themselves. The visuals, the audio, everything was just so big in that moment. And it just helps build to what the Stanley Cup Playoffs are all about.
And that's why they have those jobs, because they're good at that. And it was a great weekend of hockey.
That'll wrap up 3 things you need to pay attention to, brought to you by UBS Financial Services, Inc. Let's head to round 2 with our guest, Craig Button.
It's great to have Craig Button back on NHL Wraparound to do these previews and predictions of what's going to happen. And it's a fun time, especially when you're friends with the guy that's in the other window there and you can have good fun. Craig, thanks for doing this.
Yeah, it's a pleasure, Neil. I had such a joy doing the first round. And I guess now I have to give you your big props. We talked about the Florida-Tampa Bay series, and I picked Tampa and you picked Florida, and you said you love watching Tampa Bay play, but you didn't think that they had what it takes to beat the Florida Panthers when it comes to playoff time. Boy, I don't think there was any truer words spoken about that series, because Florida right now looks like a wagon.
Yeah, well, they do. I love the skill Tampa has. I love Kucherov. He's maybe my favorite player in the league, and he did Zippo in that series. They didn't let him do anything. I mean, he got assists, yes, but he didn't do what Kucherov normally does.
Well, while we're on the subject of predictions, Neil, you were 6-2 in the opening round. All of us failed with the Kings against the Oilers. And the big difference was this Tampa Bay Florida series. And we also lost on one other series as well, and that was Colorado beating Dallas in round 1. So we get a chance to improve our predictions round 2. But Craig, before we go through this, if pain was an Olympic sport, could we agree that the bronze goes to the Kings, the silver goes to the Avalanche, and the gold goes to the Blues after this first round?
No, I'm going Kings all the way on the gold. The Kings could have swept that series. I mean, they were up 2-0. They dominated periods 1 and 2 in both games 3 and 4. And to say that they absolutely capsized, I think Jim Hiller did a real poor job of coaching that team. Like, how can you play so well and how can you do so good? And we're not talking about they stymied the Edmonton Oilers. And then once they let the Oilers back in, they couldn't. So to me, this is like Usain Bolt winning the 100 meters at the Olympics for the Kings. The Kings, to me, are the clear-cut gold medal winners when it comes to pace.
Wow. All right.
Tough to argue that.
Yeah, I'm not arguing at all. We're going to just jump right into these. And we're going to start in the East with Toronto and Florida. Toronto advances in 6 games over Ottawa after getting a big scare thrown into them. The Panthers beat the Lightning in 5. Before we get into talking points here, was there anything about either team, meaning the Panthers or the Maple Leafs, Craig, that stood out that you found out something maybe you didn't know before?
I don't know if it was something I didn't know as much as it was something that was reaffirmed. Is that the Florida Panthers, they're legitimate. Like they can beat you any way you need to be beaten. Like whether it be in a 1-0 game, whether it be in a high scoring game, whether it be in a physical game, a skating game. Again, Paul Maurice is doing a fantastic job with that group, and that group right now looks like the top contender for the Stanley Cup.
Neil, anything surprise you about either team?
Well, you've always got to be surprised by Toronto when they're still around after the first round because they don't often do that. But I think Craig Berube's coaching has to be one of the major reasons why they survived Ottawa. And they played a game. They played a good playoff style hockey, and that surprised me. It doesn't surprise me that Florida does that, but it did surprise me the way Toronto. You know, Craig, instead of saying we need one more goal and we need another goal and we need another goal, they just said we're ahead, we're battening it down. If they score another goal, then we might need a goal. But before that, it was always, well, Marner needs a goal or Nylander needs another goal or Matthews needs another goal. They just seem to be a team now under Berube that says, here's the way we have to play to win, not here's the way we have to play to get to the All-Star game or to be, to get a trophy, an individual award. And I think they're a much better team now under Craig and with the additions that they made in the offseason, for sure, with Tanev and so on. But that's what I learned about the Toronto Maple Leafs.
If I could just add one thing, too. I think Craig Berube kept it really level. And when it comes to the playoffs, there's going to be ups, there's going to be downs, there's not a panic. And I think it was after Game 5, when they lost, he was asked about the core. He says, we're not about the core, we're about our team. We need everybody playing. And he's straight ahead. There's no ducking around the edges or, it's not about, we're going to play. And he tells his players, let's go play. I agree with you, Neil. I think he's done a really nice job with this group in Toronto.
Yeah, and he was what they needed, I think. Yeah. But anyway, go ahead, Vic. Sorry.
Yep. Great points. Second playoff meeting between the clubs. They met 2 years ago in the second round. Panthers winning in 5, and the Panthers also took the season series this year 3-1. Greg, I'll open with you here. Looks like the Panthers are soliciting a little bit of advice from Brady Tkachuk to help his brother Matthew in this series. But as Neil and I discussed on Sunday, kind of cuts both ways because Anthony Stolarz, Oliver Ekman-Larsson, Steven Lorentz, all Cup winners with Florida, now playing for the Leafs. How does that play between the clubs?
I don't think it matters. I don't think if you're not wearing the same color uniform as a Florida Panthers player, they're coming after you. I mean, Neil talked earlier about Kucherov. Look what they did to Kucherov. Look what they did to the best players there. The way the Florida Panthers play is playoff hockey. They take no prisoners. Lock away your children and your dogs because that's the way they play. They make no apologies for it. Ekblad takes out Hagel because Hagel had went after Barkov. They don't have any type of illusions about what playoff hockey is, and they don't apologize for playing nasty and hard. And I think it's their identity. And if Toronto can't match that, no chance.
Neil, do they need, meaning the Panthers, more discipline against the Maple Leafs because of that power play in relation to Tampa, who also had pretty good with an extra man? But where is their discipline level need to be against Toronto?
I think early in the series, you're going to see that it's not going to be very high, their discipline level. It'll get higher as the series goes on. I think they're going to try to send the right message to Toronto, and Toronto's going to be able to stand up to 99% of it. I think this club is, this configuration of Toronto. The X factor in this for the Panthers is going to be, believe it or not, Brad Marchand, who, a lot of people said, well, he's done. That's why Boston's letting him go. He's not as fast as he used to be. He's not the same guy that he used to be. Bango. They put him on the third line. They put Brad Marchand on the third line, and he was all over Tampa Bay. He was fantastic against Tampa, and he'll be the same way against Toronto. You'll notice 63 against Toronto again. And I think he is really an X factor in the series. Look, we know what we're going to get out of Bennett. We know what we're going to get out of Matthew Tkachuk. And they're going to play just the way Craig just said. They're going to play nasty, in your face, take no prisoners, don't apologize. But I think they're definitely going to want to send some psychological messages to Toronto early in the series and take a chance that, you know what, they may even lose game one, but they'll do what they wanted to do, which is set the tone.
Can I ask a quick question to both of you? Do you think it's important for Toronto to show that they'll stand up to it and push back and go after their players?
I thought they did early in the series against Ottawa. And the question I was actually going to ask you was how the Maple Leafs are going to handle the forecheck of the Panthers, and will they be able to even attempt stretch passes that they were able to do early in their series against Ottawa? But to your point, how will the Panthers defense hold up if Toronto decides to initiate play in their zone? And will they be tough enough?
Yeah, it's just about standing up to it. Like Sam Bennett, he's going to run roughshod. I mean, he's going to take liberties. Like to Neil's point, Brad Marchand's going to take liberties. I don't know what's going on in the Florida Panthers locker room, but I can pretty much assure you that the Florida Panthers we're going after you and you and you, and let's see what they're going to do. Like they're going to test Toronto. They're going to say, are you ready for the challenge? Are you going to stand up to the challenge? I don't think it's about the skill. I think it's about how deep can Toronto dig down to stand up to the abuse. And let me be clear, the abuse that Florida is ready to dish out.
I agree with you, Craig. But I do think that this Toronto club is not the Toronto club of last year or the year before.
Agreed.
And I do think, again, they're playing in the style and in the image of their coach, who was a really tough guy, as you well know. I mean, he was amazingly tough. By the way, guys, for a chuckle, I find it amazing that Berube is coaching Ty Domi's kid when Ty Domi and Berube had such great brawls. I mean, those two went at it unbelievably. And now here's Craig coaching Max. I find that really amazing.
Maybe both of them, meaning Ty and Craig Berube, will suit up for this series before it's done. Oh. Craig, prediction on this one.
Yeah, Florida in 6.
Neil?
I always say that taking a series in 7 is the chicken's way out. And so I'm going to be the chicken, and I'm going to say Florida in 7.
I'm going to say Leafs in 6. I need to gain some ground on you here, Neil. So I'm going to go a little bit risky on this one. Let's move over to Washington and Carolina. Caps and the Hurricanes advance in 5 games, beating Montreal and New Jersey, respectively. This is their second playoff meeting. They met in 2019. Brock McGinn with the double overtime winner to propel the Hurricanes over the then defending Stanley Cup champs. Both teams won 2 games in the regular season meetings. Craig, what do you see as being different with Carolina this year? I mean, they've gone out in the second round for the last 6 years. Very often it appears that this is where it stalls for them. We saw the goaltending with Freddie Anderson going down. Looks like he's going to be okay. Kochetkov came in. But do they have enough to get past the Washington offense and the balance of that attack?
I think the size factor, throughout the Washington Capitals forward group is going to be too overwhelming for the Carolina Hurricanes. Rod Brind'Amour does a heck of a job with that team. They play hard, they play fast. But I think Washington, when we look at how Montreal played, and Montreal had some feistiness to them and everything, but when it got really heavy and hard, Montreal couldn't stand in there. And I think that Carolina is a better team. I just don't think that they're built to handle a longer series against a heavy team like the Washington Capitals. I think the Caps found a level of play that they needed to after kind of stumbling the last 2 or 3 weeks in the regular season.
I think that the X factor in this series is going to be who is going to offset Tom Wilson for Carolina. Who's the Josh Anderson of the Carolina Hurricanes? Is there going to be somebody to step up and say, You're not doing that to us the way you run around. And what a great hockey player, right, Craig? I mean, we'd love to have this guy on one of our teams. He can score 30 goals. He can beat you in the alley. He can beat you on the ice. I mean, he can do everything. But in that series with Montreal, Josh Anderson, who is not nearly the player to me that Wilson is, but I mean, he stood right in there and went toe to toe with him and became Montreal's Tom Wilson. So I think that's going to be one of the biggest factors. If both teams play the way they can play, I think, as you said, Washington's going to be too big and too strong for Carolina.
Well, we looked at Washington going into their series with Montreal. We thought that based on the way that they were playing at the end of the regular season, that Montreal might be the right kind of opponent for them to get themselves back on track.
Yes.
Do you believe that the series served its purpose?
I do. I really believe that the first round can be the hardest round in this regard. The team finishing eighth, Montreal in this case, has nothing to lose. They have nothing to lose. So they're playing like with house money. And, they're fresh. They're also not worn down. So they're going to throw everything. And I think for a top team like the Washington Capitals in this instance, it serves a purpose to help them get engaged in what is necessary to continue on in the playoffs. So I definitely think, Vic, that it served its purpose for the Washington Capitals. I know we're going to get to it. I think it took the Vegas Golden Knights a few games to get into it versus Minnesota before they realized, we're in one.
Neil, your thoughts on Carolina and what did they get out of the series against the Devils that maybe will serve them well against Washington?
That's a good question, and I'm not sure they got anything out of that because they rolled over them. I mean, this was the most pedestrian series of all the series, was Carolina and New Jersey. It was right from the beginning, because of New Jersey's injuries, you knew that Carolina was going to win that series. There's no way that Jersey could overcome both Hughes brothers being out of the lineup and their defense being decimated. And Carolina took advantage of that with the way they shoot the puck from everywhere. I don't think they're going to be able to do that with the Washington Capitals. And I'm not sure that, other than getting Anderson back in the net after he got hurt against the Devils, that there's going to be something that they can glean from that series and say, okay, here's what we've got to do better, or here's what we really did well. I think that was not like Montreal and Washington, where Montreal exposed some things to Washington to let them improve on. I don't think that was the case with the Devils.
Prediction?
My prediction on this one is going to be Washington in 5.
Greg?
Washington in 6. And, because that Carolina Hurricanes team under Rod Brind'Amour impresses me, just how tenacious they are. They hang in there, just back to Neil's point real quick, and I'll be fast on this. In that last game when New Jersey got up 3-0, I'm watching the game. I'm going, Carolina doesn't look one bit worried about being down 3-0, and they weren't. And but I do. I'm giving a credit to Rod Brind'Amour and his team for hanging in there. But I don't think it wouldn't surprise me if it's 5. But I'll go 6. I won't be chicken and say 7.
I won't be chicken either, and I'm on the side of Craig here with the Hurricanes in 6. We're halfway done with the second round series. Just a reminder that our website is nhlwraparound.com, and Neil and I will be with you all week with our Stanley Cup dates starting on Tuesday. So we head to the West. The President's Trophy winning Winnipeg Jets get the big scare in the first round. They survived to meet Dallas. It's their first ever playoff meeting. The Jets won 3 out of 4, outscoring the Stars 13-5. Neil, I'm going to start with you here. How much was Dallas loving that the most physical series of the first round went to double overtime in Game 7?
Oh, they are loving it, and they're loving it that they might have rather played Winnipeg than have played St. Louis in this next round. It'll all depend. Well, all. It'll depend greatly on Heiskanen and Robertson and whether they're back for Dallas. And if they are, boy, oh boy, Winnipeg thought they had trouble with St. Louis. This will be very troublesome.
Yeah, I can't disagree. I'm going to paraphrase Nathan McKinnon after they lost Game 7 in the series. He said, "We couldn't beat them without their best defenseman and arguably one of the best forwards." He goes, "Where do we go from here? We need to find answers." Well, now Heiskanen and Robertson are going to be back at some point, according to Peter DeBoer. Winnipeg's going to have to find answers because with those two guys coming back in the lineup at some point, based on what Peter DeBoer has said, I'm not so sure that they don't move right to the front of the line in the West as the contender to get to the Stanley Cup final, because those two guys are big time players.
We had talked about it, Neil and I did yesterday, that perhaps now they're the team to beat. And when you factor in that these are like two injury ships passing in the night, because Heiskanen and Robertson coming back. We don't know the status of Scheifele. We don't know the status of Morrissey after suffering that upper body injury in Game 7. So this could really tip the scales, Craig, in the favor of the Dallas Stars.
It could, but the Dallas Stars are going to have to recognize that the Jets started the series without Velarde and without Ehlers. They ended the series without Scheifele and Morrissey, two top players. But the Dallas Stars were able to win despite their losses, and Pete DeBoer did a hell of a job getting that whole team to play. I think Scott Arniel does the same thing in there. So I guess the cautionary tale for the Dallas Stars is don't underestimate your opponent based on who they don't have in the lineup. And I think that Dallas is much stronger. I mean, Heiskanen's a brilliant player, and so is Robertson. And I think it makes it tough for Winnipeg because of the chunks. I mean, they had 600 combined hits, just over 600 combined hits in the series. And you can go 3 months in the National Hockey League and not have 600 combined hits.
Yeah.
To have that in a 7-game series, that's grueling. And I think there were some chunks taken out of the Winnipeg Jets in that series.
Which Connor Hellebuck, Craig, are we going to see in this series? The one that played in St. Louis, or the one that looked like he got his confidence back once the Jets tied Game 7 and got it into overtime, and his mechanics all of a sudden appear to have come back?
Yeah, I mean, after the second goal went in by Joseph, you're sitting there at 2-0. You're going, how are you going to handle this narrative? Like the goaltender that's been the best in the NHL for 2 seasons, and you're looking at it and you're going, how are you going to handle this narrative? Because it just didn't make sense. I think his save percentage going into Game 6 or Game 7 was what, .820 or something? 820. That doesn't give you a starting spot in the East Coast Hockey League, let alone in the National Hockey League. And but then at 2-0, he made some really good saves, even at 3-1 to keep him in it. And I think Connor Hellebuck, his biggest fight was with himself. I don't think it was about the opponent. I think it was with himself. I think if anything that Connor can take out of it is he found a way to get on the right side of it. One thing I was thinking about a couple of years ago, Sergei Bobrovsky, who had won some Vezinas, had a little bit of success, he stumbled. He wasn't even the starting goaltender for the Florida Panthers against Boston. And then they went to him because they were down 3-1. They went all the way to the Stanley Cup final. Bobrovsky found his game. The Winnipeg Jets are hoping that Connor Hellebuck has found his confidence and therefore his game. He's going to be a huge factor in this series. There's no question. And if Connor Hellebuck plays like he did, like for the last 55 minutes of Game 7, the Jets are going to be in good shape.
Neil, very often you see teams in the playoffs that are heavily favored. They get the big scare, and then they start to roll from there. Do you see this in the case of Winnipeg here?
Absolutely. Not to say that I'm saying that they're going to beat Dallas Stars, but you need adversity at some point during the season because adversity is going to come in the playoffs. Winnipeg had very little adversity during the regular season. They rolled right from the very beginning, right till the end as the President's Trophy team, the whole way. And then they hit adversity big time in St. Louis because St. Louis, as Craig said about Montreal, was playing with house money. They weren't supposed to be in the playoffs. They got in very, very late. They got a big, heavy team. They found their game. Bennington, since the Four Nations face-off, was playing like Johnny Bauer. I knew that'd get you to laugh, but no, he's been playing fantastic. But then, so I think it will serve Winnipeg really well to have had that kind of a scare thrown into them. The one thing I want to say about this series, and I'm not saying it just because of Dallas's Game 7, I've watched Rantanen for a long time. I love him as a player. I loved him in Colorado. I fell off my chair when they traded him to Carolina. It looks like he's found his game again in Dallas, and he's comfortable in Dallas. And boy, if he's found his game and he's comfortable with all the rest of the guys they've got on Dallas, and if Heiskanen plays, and if Robertson plays, that's going to be a tough opponent for Winnipeg.
I want to ask Neil a question about Wyatt Johnston, because Neil drafted Sergei Fedorov, and Fedorov was a fourth-round draft pick, and he was a player that, I mean, it was Russia, it was Soviet Union. There, people go, "Oh, what a fourth round." No, people knew it was just a matter of when you were going to take him. When you watch, and Sergei got maligned at different points in his career because he was such a brilliant player, he was such a smart player. When you watch Wyatt Johnston play, like, he's not racing around the ice, he's using his head and he knows how to play. Do you see him as somebody that's really started to mesh with Mikko? I mean, Hintz has been good, but I watched the way Wyatt Johnston plays, and I'm just so massively impressed with how. And I'm just wondering if you see any type of thinking similarities, Neil, between the two.
I think he's adapting himself to make it work with Rantanen. That's I think his hockey IQ, if you want to say, is that he's figuring out and has figured out what he needs to do to make that partnership work so well. You know, he is that brilliant of a player, I believe, Wyatt Johnston. That's why at that size and that age, he's been so good already in the NHL in these tough situations. Sergei, just to comment on him for a minute, Sergei's speed and skill was off the charts, as you know, Craig. I mean, just off the charts. But he did have, some mental issues. And when I say that, I don't mean that there was anything psychologically wrong with him, but there were times when he was maligned, as you said, because you just didn't see the effort in him. Like, it was like he was almost getting bored. I don't think we'll see that with Wyatt Johnston.
Yeah. The reason I brought it up was because, I was talking to Ray Ferraro and we were talking about don't confuse activity with accomplishment. And I think that's why somebody like Sergei got maligned, because, he's kind of going, okay, I got to build in my own challenges here, because he did get bored. I don't think there was any question when you're that brilliant, and Fedorov was brilliant. And when I watch Wyatt, I just think this guy just thinks the game at such a high level that sometimes it doesn't look like he's not doing anything, but he's getting ready to do something.
Yeah.
Taking this series, Craig?
I'm taking Dallas. And, I think, at the beginning of the playoffs, I thought Winnipeg had a legitimate chance to push through. I really did. But with Heiskanen and Robertson coming back, with what the Dallas Stars went through, too, with adversity, I'm picking that. And I'm going full chicken mode here. I'm going Game 7.
All right, Neil, staying in the coop or no?
Yeah, I'm running afoul. I got my chicken wings out and I'm going Dallas in 7.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to have a little bit more bravado than either of you, and I'm going to take the Stars in 6 in this one, and that leaves us with one series left: Vegas against Edmonton, the first and third teams in the Pacific. Vegas advances over Minnesota in 6, and Edmonton over the Kings in 6. This is their second playoff meeting. The Golden Knights won in 6 games in 2023 in the second round en route to the Stanley Cup. The teams split 4 games during the course of the regular season, each winning one in the other's building. So, Mattias Ekholm out for the series for the Edmonton Oilers. But what a stunning comeback by the Albertans to get into this round. And this has to make them that much more confident now that they're also the defending Western Conference champions from a year ago, Craig.
Last year, they had to win 2 series on the road to get to the Stanley Cup final. They have to win this game, this series on the road. They're not daunted about starting on the road. They know that they can fall behind in games and come back. They fell behind 3-0 in the Stanley Cup final last year and came roaring back to make it a game 7. So the confidence level you talk about, Vic, is high there. I think that some of their players that were out, Evander Kane, who's come back, played well. Trent Frederick looks healthy. Their depth is helping out. Obviously, you miss a player like that, Colin, that goes without saying. And I think Chris Knobloch, has been bold. And not bold just to be bold. He said, you know what? We need a change in goal. He did it last year. Pickard, you're going in. He's not afraid to mix things up. He's got the courage of his convictions. And Neil and Vic, you know this. When the players have the trust of the coach, it's almost like he could tell them to do anything. And they're prepared to do it. But more than that, they're prepared to do it because they believe in him. And I think the Edmonton Oilers believe in Chris Knobloch. I mean, Bruce Cassidy's a heck of a coach. I think Chris Knobloch is as well.
Neil, the Golden Knights win over Minnesota, probably a lot more conventional. I mean, it was just a good hockey series. And as Craig had pointed out earlier, it appeared that it took the Golden Knights probably 3 or so games to start to get some traction in this series. How do you see their maturity? I mean, they're only 2 years removed from winning the Stanley Cup. How do you see their maturity against what the Oilers learned last year playing into this matchup this season?
Well, first of all, I think this series is going to revolve in good part around Adin Hill versus whoever. I don't know who Edmonton's going to put in net, but he won't. I don't think either one of them is as good as Adin Hill. I think that's where Vegas has a real edge. However, guys, we've been watching Edmonton missing guys for a long time now. I mean, they had Draisaitl out, they had McDavid out, they've had Kane has been out all season long. And by the way, like him or don't like him, you got to give Kane marks for missing a whole season and playing the way he's been playing in the playoffs. I'm shocked by it. I think that Vegas is going to have a real tough time. I think I agree with everything Craig said, that I think that first round was a lot more beneficial to Edmonton than it was to Vegas. I think it was obviously beneficial. You beat Minnesota. They're a good team. They got those 2 guys back, and they put a heck of a scare into Vegas. But I think with Draisaitl and McDavid and Bouchard and on, that Edmonton's going to overpower Vegas. And that overpowering is going to make up for the deficit in goal. That's the way I see it. I love Jack Eichel. I love the way he plays. But Edmonton's got 3 or 4 Jack Eichels, I think.
Well, Craig, that brings me to another point here, is the X factor of the 1 and 2 picks in 2015. Jack Eichel has what Connor McDavid wants most of all. And we have seen when McDavid plays with drive, what kind of player he is. And now he's got to have even more motivation, A, because of this matchup with Eichel, but B, how close he came last year and didn't get it, and how badly he wants to get back.
There's no question, and we start to look at contemporaries, right? So if we look at contemporaries of Connor McDavid, in 2022, the Colorado Avalanche knocked the Edmonton Oilers out of the playoffs. Contemporary Nathan MacKinnon. 2023, the Vegas Golden Knights knocked the Edmonton Oilers out of the playoffs. Contemporary Jack Eichel. Connor got to the Stanley Cup final last year, again, in a really hard series. We know one thing about Connor McDavid. He's wired for one thing and one thing only. It's to win the Stanley Cup. And, you think about what he did last year in the playoffs. He was the best player in the playoffs. He won the Conn Smythe. Jack Eichel could have won the Conn Smythe in 2023. But when you watch 97 and 29 play, I'll be quite frank here. I don't think the Vegas Golden Knights can match those 2 guys. I love Jack Eichel. I think he's a superstar in the league. McDavid and Draisaitl are a different level of superstar, and they're a different level of difference maker. And they did it to get their team belief. Remember, they lost that first game to LA. They were down, and a fluke goal by Danault won them the game. But it was McDavid and Draisaitl that got them back to just having a belief. Hey, wait a second. No lead we can't overcome any deficit. And they showed the way. And now, I mean, they're up there in the playoff scoring, but to me, You talk about X factor. I think Aiden Hill, you're right. He's a better goaltender, but 97 and 29 can take a game and just twist it in their team's favor like that. I don't think Vegas has that.
It's amazing. 2.5 months ago, the Four Nations meant everything to McDavid, and now it's so far back in the rearview mirror, you only have to look ahead here to know how much bigger that this really is. Craig, your pick on this series?
In the first series, I picked LA. I thought LA's chance was significant. I think they played well enough where they could convince themselves they should be playing in the second round. But you gotta find a way to win and beat a team. I said I'll never bet against McDavid and Draisaitl, but I was betting against the Oilers. Now seeing the players that have returned, the depth, to what Neil pointed out with playing without where they're at, Chris Knoblauch, I'm picking the Oilers, and I'm going full Seinfeld with the chicken lights where I can't sleep at night, and
Kenny
7 for the Edmonton Oilers.
All right, Neil, you're up.
Yeah. You know what? I picked LA
not
to beat.
You again. Come on. 7?
No, wait a minute. Can I give you an explanation of why I'm picking what?
It's your show.
LA, I thought would beat Edmonton because of the way I saw Edmonton come down the stretch in the regular season. Now I've had a chance to see Edmonton healthy, get all their players back, see Evander Kane the way he's played. They got 2 goalies that they have confidence in. I'm not saying that they're great goalies, but they have 2 goalies that they have confidence in. And so I just think Edmonton just will overpower Vegas. They've just got too much. And we don't even talk about Hyman. We haven't even mentioned him because there's so much on this team. And I don't see the Achilles heel of Edmonton being exposed by Vegas. So I'm going to say Edmonton, and I'm going to go out on a limb here and say 6, not 7.
I'm taking Edmonton in 6. And if you notice, all 4 series I picked in 6. So basically, I took out the 5 iron just to hit it right down the middle. I'm playing real conservative here.
Well, you know what's fascinating, Vic? You know what's fascinating, and I agree with what Neil just said too. I was going to say just what he said, about Edmonton. Teams have to start to show you to convince you, and I think that's exactly what Edmonton has done here.
Yeah, I agree.
Before we go, we had some random questions in the first round, and we had who was going to have their coming out party. Craig, you had suggested Mark Scheifele. Right now, we just hope he's coming back. Neil, you had Jake Sanderson of Ottawa. I had Wyatt Johnston, which, Neil, I'll remind you of again. And for the players with the most pressure, Craig, you had Auston Matthews and Mitch Marner. They're moving on to the next round. Neil, you had Connor McDavid. He is moving on to the next round. And I took the easy way out with Connor Hellebuck, who, despite maybe not being at his best, he still survived the Game 7 overtime. He is moving to the next round. So quickly, random questions. We're going to look back to round 1. Craig, you first. Of the teams eliminated in the first round, which can feel best about heading into next season?
I would say St. Louis in the West. And, it almost, Minnesota's going to end up with a ton of cap space now because Suter and Parise come off. Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see what Bill Guerin does here. Neil, you pointed out it's a lot different when you have the money to spend, when you can say we don't have the money to spend. So that puts, but I like St. Louis. I think St. Louis. And it's hard to say that Montreal didn't gain a lot from making the playoffs and going there. So I picked one in the East. I picked one in the West.
Neil?
Well, I like exactly what Craig has said. I think Minnesota had a really good year this year. They missed the playoffs last year. We can't forget that. They missed the playoffs last year. And they've got a great summer coming up with the cap increase and then the 2 guys coming off of their cap. So I think Minnesota had a real good ending to their season. I do think St. Louis had a great ending. I think Doug Armstrong never expected them to be this good because he told me so. He said, I'm building for 2 to 3 years down the road. But in came Jim Montgomery, did a fabulous job, and some of their players stepped it up. So, again, I like the way St. Louis did. I think in the East, it's easy to say Ottawa and Montreal because they were the guys that got in at the very end. I think both Ottawa and Montreal are different than Minnesota that we talk about in the West and St. Louis that we talk about in the West. I think Ottawa and Montreal have got to be very careful what they do this summer and not think they're better than they really are, because I've seen teams that have had a great run, made the postseason, got knocked out, and then thought they were a playoff team, an automatic playoff team. And Ottawa and Montreal are not automatic playoff teams next season. They're going to have to keep working.
Yeah. I'll add one thing. New Jersey Devils 112 points 2 seasons ago and missed the playoffs the following year. Exhibit A. Good point.
I'm going to still say Montreal as the answer to this question because I like the youth. I actually like their goaltending now. Lane Hudson came out of nowhere to be potential rookie of the year this season. So I think they're going to use this year as a stepping stone for 25-26. And final question, of the teams eliminated in round one, which player has emerged as a player to look for if you're making your fantasy picks for next year? Craig, you first.
Craig, me first. Fantasy picks for next year. Wow. Well, he had a really good year, and I think he's only going to get better. I'm going with Matt Boldy of the Minnesota Wild.
Neil?
Do you want an unknown, or do you want to go with the obvious like Kucherov, McKinnon, Makar? I mean, they all got eliminated, and they're all, first ballot All-Stars.
It fits. Go ahead, whoever you
want.
Well,
I mean, I'll say them, but let's go to somebody less known that you mentioned, and that's Lane Hudson. I think Lane Hudson is going to get better. He's going to have an even better year next year, and we're going to see this guy for the next 10 to 15 years be an elite offensive defenseman for the Montreal Canadiens.
Yeah.
I'm going to say Juraj Slafkovsky of the Canadiens. I'm sticking north of the border again. I got the chapeau on. And I just saw him emerging more and more as a power forward, maybe somewhat of a Matt Boldy East, so to speak. So that's my guy.
That's a good comparison. To put those two guys together there. One thing I'd like to just add real quickly, and we can bat around, but where did the Colorado Avalanche and Tampa Bay Lightning go? I mean, we knew they were contenders. All in, then there's no Neil. You know about being all in, and there's risk reward with it. But they got some work to do in terms of evaluation, and then where do they go? Because they still have a good team, and they have good players. But it's not about having a good team and good players. They want to be in the championship mix.
I've been thinking about that. I mean, these are two teams that were Stanley Cup contenders right up until the buzzer went in the last game. And they're both sitting there going, now what? I mean, maybe what they need to do is call Toronto and ask them how you deal with being knocked out early with a good team. And what do you do? Toronto's a good example of what they did. I didn't agree with them firing Sheldon Keefe. They did after his team got eliminated in overtime in Game 7 by Boston. But they did a great move in bringing in Berube, and they made some other really good subtle changes to a good team. And I think that maybe that's where Tampa Bay and Colorado should take a lesson from. Take a look at what Toronto did, made some subtle changes, and came back just as strong or stronger.
We'll leave it at that. Craig Button from TSN. Phenomenal insight, as always, and thank you again for joining us for NHL Wraparound's second round preview.
Well, Vic and Neil, thank you. Thank you. This is so enjoyable, and it's something that I really appreciate you reaching out to me, and I really like to be part of it. So thank you both very much.
Well, be ready to come back for the next round.
I'm ready, Neil. I'm ready.
Because we want to talk. The most fun for me is talking about who we picked and whether we were right or wrong and going. I just love doing that. And Vic's good about having all this on the record, and he'll make sure that it gets thrown right in our face in the next round.
I have the teacher's edition. So
Yeah, well, good. Well, it's a pleasure. Neil, I think you asked me. I said yes. What did I didn't even say yes. I just said what time, didn't I?
That's all you said. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
And believe me, we really appreciate you
yeah,
taking the time to do this for us. We really do. We're not just saying that like a throw out line. We really appreciate you helping us.
and I know that, and I feel that, and I mean, to be part of this with people that I respect, and Neil, we've been friends for a long time, and somebody I have great respect for you. And when you ask me, I go, yeah, there's certain things that are just automatics.
Great. Well,
Yeah,
thanks
we'll
for
see you in
that.
2 weeks.
yeah, okay. Hey, and you don't have to rub everything in our face, Vic.
I'll behave more next time.
Okay,
Take care.
thanks.
See ya.
Neil, there are few people that are more fun to have hockey discussion with than Craig Button. Insightful, humorous, and brings the whole package.
And you know, he is a media guy now. He is on TSN regularly. And media guys are studying these games. I mean, what's great about talking to him is I don't care where you go with the conversation. He's got an opinion and he's seen it. He's been watching all these series very closely, very intently. And his comments have a lot of intelligence behind them. And I mean that in both ways of being an intelligent person and you've gathered intelligence on what you're looking at. He's very, very insightful.
Does doing a podcast together for over a year make us media people now?
I wouldn't say so. I'd say we're media people once we start getting paid.
Sponsors, you're listening? Speaking of media, the playoff schedule coming up for Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. All games on ESPN. Monday, Toronto and Florida at 8 o'clock. That is game one of that series played in Toronto. On Tuesday, Carolina at Washington at 7, followed by Edmonton and Vegas at 9:30. And Wednesday, Toronto and Florida, game 2 at 7 o'clock. And Winnipeg and Dallas will open up their series at 9:30, that game being played in Winnipeg. Some news around the NHL. The draft lottery will be held Monday, 7 o'clock on ESPN and Sportsnet. Matthew Schaefer, defenseman out of Erie, expected to go number 1. Who else came out of Erie?
I think that kid McDavid did.
Well, this guy turns out half as good. The team that gets him is going to be in pretty good shape. The top 3 with the best odds to land the first pick: San Jose, 18.5%, Chicago, 13.5%, and Nashville, 11.5%. Some injury news, as often happens after teams are eliminated. Joel Eriksson Ek played through a core muscle injury. He will have surgery to deal with this issue, but he should be ready for the 2025-26 season. Brady Tkachuk confirming he played through the opening round series with the Maple Leafs with a hip injury suffered at the Four Nations, so he is going to pass on the World Hockey Championships. But somebody that's going for the first time in 10 years, Sidney Crosby, going to represent Canada, and it is very possible that Nathan McKinnon, his good buddy, will have a chance to join him. That tournament will be played in Sweden and Denmark.
And I have a couple of news items for you, a couple of Devils to report on.
Okay.
Jesper Bratt and Luke Hughes will both have shoulder surgery, but are both expected to recover in time for training camp.
This is the human side of the story. And during the first round of the playoffs, Neil, we saw how goats can go to heroes and heroes can go to goats within a series, within a game, within a period even. And we'll start with Connor Hellebuck, who survived 3 disasters in St. Louis, save percentage of just over .750. He allows 2 quick goals in Game 7. I even texted you a single word that said hook. And yet, Scott Arniel sticks with him. He manages to get through the second and the third periods with the dramatic comeback by Winnipeg. And then we get to overtime. He looks like a completely different goaltender. He's squaring up to pucks. Rebound control is good. All of that confidence that was missing for so much of this series managed to come back within the overtimes.
Yeah, and it can change that quickly, and momentum for whole teams can change that quickly, not just individual players, where you see suddenly it's something you can't describe. It's something you must be able to feel in a building when momentum changes. And certainly Connor Hellebuyck took the momentum shift that went towards Winnipeg and put it into his own game and went back to being the goalie that we saw all during the regular season. And had it not been for Connor Hellebuyck's goaltending, the way he played in the overtime, this could have gone towards St. Louis in the overtime.
And of course, Hellebuyck getting a little bit of revenge on Jordan Binnington, who beat him in overtime in the championship game of the Four Nations face-off. But then we can also look at the flip side of this card. Players that had real solid opening rounds for their clubs, but a couple of bad decisions wound up turning the tide against their teams. And I'm talking about Quinton Byfield with his turnover late in Game 4 in the Kings series against the Oilers. Had a chance to just simply chip a puck out, tried to carry it, and instead wound up watching Evan Bouchard's goal go in to tie the game. And of course, the Oilers went on not only to win Game 4 in overtime, but to win that series in 6 games. And Pavel Buchnevich on Sunday had a chance to actually skate a puck out of the zone in the final minute, but instead he goes for the empty net, shoots it actually over the Winnipeg cage with 46 seconds left. And as the ensuing plays took place, the Jets wind up tying the game on the Perfetti goal with 3 seconds left.
Yeah, and then hockey is a game of instantaneous decision-making by all the participants. And you've only got a millisecond to make that decision of to keep skating or should I know I can hit the net from here. And then you miss, it's an icing. You've put your team at risk because you made that decision. And the same with Quinton Byfield, who thinks, oh, for sure I can beat this guy, but he thinks it in a millisecond. He doesn't think it in a longer period of time. You can also move to Quinton Byfield's coach, Jim Hiller, who makes a decision to challenge a goaltender interference situation, which backfires. No goaltender interference is deemed by the league, and therefore the Kings are awarded a penalty for delay of game. What happens on that power play for Edmonton? Edmonton scores, and the Kings put themselves in a hole and end up losing. So these decisions that are made, they can go the other way too. I mean, 1994, Stefan Matteau's coming around from behind the net. He's being hooked by the defenseman, which throws him off, that makes him try to center the puck out to Esa Tikkanen. It inadvertently hits the paddle of Marty Brodeur's stick and goes in behind him in the net. Game 7, overtime win. Stefan Matteau, famous for the rest of his life for that one instantaneous decision of throwing the puck out to the front to try to get it to Tikkanen, who's crashing the crease. And that's back in the olden days. But those decisions are made. There's thousands and thousands of those decisions made during a hockey game. And sometimes they go very wrong, and sometimes they go very right. And had Buchnevich hit the net, Winnipeg is eliminated. They can't come back. But instead, he misses the net, face-off, goal. Today, Winnipeg is moving on. St. Louis is gone home.
It's also remarkable from the human sense that Hellebuyck's move from go to, I'm not going to call him hero yet, but he's a Game 7 winning goaltender in overtime. But that takes place over the period of about 2 weeks. And the decisions that we're talking about with Byfield and Buchnevich are literally split second, and you played at a high level. You know how fast this game is and what it is to just have to think that quickly, or is it just all instinct that takes over?
Well, it's the 10,000 hours of practice that you put in trying to hone your craft, and therefore it becomes instinctual of what to do and what your various opportunities are. What are your options? What can you do at that particular moment that you've done, 2,500 times? You've been in that situation and banked it off the boards or chipped it by or gone down and blocked the shot or whatever it is that you do. They're very, very fast, quick decisions. One decision that should be heralded today is the decision of the coach of the Winnipeg Jets, Scott Arniel. The announcers, Brian Boucher and Eddie Olczyk, were debating back and forth whether or not Hellebuck should have been lifted after the second goal last night. And, Scott Arniel showed confidence in Hellebuck and was rewarded for it. In the way that Hellebuck played for the rest of the game. Not saying that Eric Comrie wouldn't have played well if he'd come in, but I think that was the right decision. Stay with the guy that got you there, and that certainly was Hellebuck.
That's what makes it all human.
Absolutely. It's human decisions, human instinct, and human teamwork, and that's what makes it such a great game to watch.
That concludes our show for today. Thanks to Craig Button from TSN for joining us. Thanks to UBS Financial Services, Inc. NHL Wraparound and UBS Financial Services, Inc. are not affiliated. UBS is a sponsor of 3 things you need to pay attention to. No other affiliation, relationship, or endorsement is made, suggested, intended, or should be implied or inferred between UBS and VNS Productions, LLC, or any of the individuals or businesses and or their respective products and services appearing in this program. Thank you, as always, to our growing list of listeners. Please send questions or comments to nhlwraparound@gmail.com or reach us individually at neil@nhlwraparound.com or vic@nhlwraparound.com. Remember that all of our shows are on all podcast platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Amazon, iHeartRadio, Spotify, YouTube, and our complete catalog can be found on our website, nhlwraparound.com. So please subscribe, like us on Facebook, and also check out some of our more recent content on X at NHL Wraparound. Neil and I look forward to speaking with you again with Stanley Cup Date on Tuesday. We will take a look back at the Toronto, Florida first game of that series and then look ahead to the Tuesday action. Take care.
Thanks for joining us on the NHL Wraparound podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to stay up to date on all the NHL action.